When you think of VGC, you might think of the best Pokemon trainers on the planet going against each other with the strongest of Pokemon. But that's not always the case. Although there are some situations, like Sword and Shield, where Zacian and the Calyrex riders were seen everywhere because they were just so much stronger than every other Pokemon. But for every Pokemon that's overtuned, there is a good enough player to find a way around it. This can lead to people bringing some pretty interesting Pokemon to tournaments. Because if Pokemon were truly just the strongest against the strongest, you would expect both Kyogre and Groudon to have won more than one World Championship each since 2010. Now what we're going to talk about today is the Pokemon that have outperformed their evolved forms. Thanks to both the eviolite item and the difference in abilities, some Pokemon are actually considered better before they evolve. But before we get into the specifics, we need to talk about why a Pokemon might be seen as better before it evolves. Because of course, Pokemon as a general rule of thumb have lower stats before evolving. Now generally, the Pokemon that are used instead of their evolved forms play a different role. Take the Porygon line for example, where Porygon-z is used as a big special attacker with the ability Adaptability, whereas Porygon-2 is seen as a bulky Trick Room setter with coverage moves. Now Porygon-z has seen some success in the past, as it was used a lot in 2017 and even has a decent placement in 2019 and 2022. But the problem with Porygon-z is that it fails to stand out in its role as a big special attacker. Its speed stat is middling, and overall its defenses just aren't very good. But Porygon-2, with the eviolite to enhance its bulk, stands out in its role as a Trick Room setter. With access to the move Recover, it increases its already strong staying power, but with Bolt Beam coverage and a respectable special attack stat, it becomes impossible to leave unchecked. With the eviolite item, Pokemon like Porygon-2 and Clefairy become next to impossible to remove from the field. These Pokemon become bulkier than their evolved forms while still keeping all of the supportive tools that they need to fill their role. But the difference between a Pokemon like Clefairy and a Pokemon like Clefable isn't as simple as just the stats or the move pool. With eviolite, Clefairy does become slightly bulkier than Clefable, while keeping the exact same supportive move pool that makes Clefable usable. However, the biggest difference in these two Pokemon, and the reason why Clefairy is utilized more, is the ability Friend Guard. Because VGC is a 2v2 format, having the ability that reduces the damage taken for your teammates is incredibly valuable. Having this accompanied with the move Follow Me, which redirects any moves that are not multi-target into the user, it is no question why Clefairy gets better usage numbers than Clefable, especially in higher power formats where we use restricted legendaries. A 25% difference in the damage taken for your best Pokemon can be the difference between winning and losing a game. Now, as we said, a Pokemon like Clefairy and Clefable have the same moveset with all of these supporting moves that they need. But when a Pokemon gets a big upgrade to their move pool upon evolution, is it worth keeping them with an eviolite in their middle stages? And this is where the Pokemon's role comes in the most. Because with the release of the Scarlet and Violet games, the Steel and Dragon type Duraludon got an evolution. And my first thought when Arcaludon was announced was that Eviolite Duraludon was going to ruin the game. You are taking a Pokemon with already very good physical bulk and an incredible special attack stat and giving it access to the Eviolite item. However, as we saw very early on in Arcaludon's lifespan, having access to the ability Stamina, having increased stats, and being given a new signature move in Electro Shot heavily outweighed the benefit of using Eviolite on Duraludon. Now there are some Pokemon that have seen usage over their evolved form simply due to a lack of options. In early Generation 9, Murkrow took over the competitive scene. This isn't because Murkrow was better statistically with the Eviolite than Honchkrow. This is because Murkrow was the only prankster Tailwind user in the entire game. This, combined with the move Haze, which counteracts Dondozo's stat boosts, and access to the move Foul Play, which gives Murkrow a source of damage, it found its place in the metagame pretty easily. This wasn't Murkrow's only time in the spotlight, however. Just because Murkrow is a niche pick for a Tailwind option, it has been used in 2017 to win multiple regionals in a very high-powered format. Some of Murkrow's success has come just because it was the only option, but some of it has to do with him being immune to Taunt as well. The last Pokemon I want to give a shout out to is Dusclops. On paper, Dusclops is worse than Dusknoir, But for a Pokemon with already incredible defenses, to only increase its defense, special defense, and HP by 5 when it evolves, it can find its niche with the Eviolite item. Now on evolution, it gains a higher speed stat and a higher attack stat, both of which are useless for the niche that Dusclops fills. See, these Pokemon are Trick Room setters, typically slow Pokemon with the access to the move Trick Room and incredible bulk. Dusclops has only 25 speed, which makes it the first Pokemon to move in Trick Room in 99% of situations. And being a ghost type means that Dusclops will get Trick Room up 99% of the time if you cannot one-shot it. But with 130 base defenses, the Eviolite item, and the fact that it is a mono type, meaning there is no 4 times weakness, you will not be one-shotting a Dusclops before it can get Trick Room up. Now, Dusclops has seen a lot of success, not as much in Scarlet and Violet, but a fair amount. And there was a strategy with Dynamax where you would bulldoze first in Trick Room to proc your teammate's weakness policy. And because of Dusclops' terrible attack, it wouldn't affect your teammate much besides giving them the bonus. Now that we've talked about the history of people choosing Pokemon with Eviolite over their evolved forms, now let's talk about some Pokemon that I think have potential to be used in unique and interesting ways with the Eviolite item. Now I do want to give a shout out to Electabuzz, who did win a regional at the end of 2024. This is because of the Eviolite item, Follow Me, and the ability Vital Spirit. This allows Electabuzz to completely shut down Spore, while still being fast enough to get value out of Electro Web under Tailwind. This makes it a perfect piece for Tail Room teams, which I'm not sure how viable they will be in a double restricted format, but it's nice to give it a shout here. So a Pokemon I wanted to bring up is Scraggy. Not Scrafty, Scraggy. So when we talk about Pokemon that fill very, very specific niches, Scraggy comes up. We are talking about a Dark-type Pokemon with access to Fake Out and Intimidate, as well as moves like Knock Off and Foul Play. But in that case, why wouldn't you just use Scrafty, its evolved form? Especially when you consider that Scrafty has had countless results over the years. Well, Scraggy got brought to Worlds. This wasn't just some throwaway tournament or a local that a player attended. This was the Pokemon World Championships, and this player thought that Scraggy gave him the best chance to win. So Scraggy has access to Fake Out, which will allow a Calyrex Ice Rider to get Trick Room up much easier. You pair this with the ability Intimidate, as well as Foul Play to threaten opposing Calyrexes, and access to the move Coaching, which increases an ally's attack and defense by 1 stage. But the reason to use Scraggy over Scrafty is actually because of the speed stat. You see, Scraggy has worse bulk than Scrafty, but in every other area does the same thing. But the benefit to Scrafty is that it can underspeed a minimum speed Calyrex Ice Rider. This gives Scraggy both the option to threaten opposing Calyrexes, or to use Coaching on its own Calyrex in order to give it a +1 boost before it attacks. Now this isn't me saying Scraggy should be meta, as this is its only placement in any tournament ever, but it does show that if the niche fits correctly, any unevolved Pokemon can be used over its evolved form. Just on this topic, I wanted to give a shout out to Galarian Corsola. Can't use it right now, but incredibly bulky, awesome mon. The next Pokemon up is Misdreavus. Now, Misdreavus has a good move pool, including Foul Play, which is a trend that you'll see throughout these Pokemon. And the reason Foul Play is so important is because typically unevolved Pokemon have a lower attack stat than what you require in VGC. And because Foul Play goes off the opponent's attack stat rather than your own, it's a very good way to output damage even if you have a bad attack stat. Now, Misdreavus has been used before. It got 14th at a tournament and 2nd at a tournament. Granted, the 2nd was in 2013. Now, Misdreavus' evolution is Mismagius, which is just a dollar store Fluttermane at this point. Fluttermane has higher of the 3 stats that it's invested in, which is special attack, speed, and special defense, as well as the secondary fairy typing. Now, if even its evolved form is obsolete, why would Misdreavus ever be used? Now, because the Eviolite item applies a 50% bonus to the actual defensive stats rather than the defensive base stats, Misdreavus is significantly more bulky than Mismagius. This Pokemon has a great supporting move pool with moves like Taunt, Thunder Wave, multiple stat dropping moves, as well as Imprison and Trick Room. Now, since Imprison stops any Pokemon in the field from using a move that it is shared with the user, that means that Misdreavus can turn off moves like Protect, can turn off Taunt, and most importantly, turn off Trick Room. Now, there are a lot of Pokemon that have access to these moves, but one benefit of Misdreavus is it has 3 immunities and good staying power with its bulk. Now, there are, of course, better Pokemon. If you want a Ghost-type, Calyrex Shadow Rider is right there, Fluttermane is right there. But with access to Will-O-Wisp and Parasong as well, this Pokemon can see a small niche that it could fit. This is not a Pokemon that you can randomly slap on a team and expect success because it is generally bad. But just last year, Scraggy got brought to Worlds, so you never know. Anyways, the last Pokemon option I have here is Pikachu. As we know, Raichu has pretty decent results. It gets used with Kyogre a lot as it has access to Fake Out and Lightning Rod, which are very good tools as it gets rid of one of Kyogre's major weaknesses, and Fake Out allows Kyogre to move first in a lot of cases, meaning a Water Spout gets off with full power. Pikachu has access to those exact same tools, except it has a way of going about supporting Kyogre that no other Pokemon can do. Protecting Kyogre from the likes of Miraidon just by being alive on the field is an incredible strength in its own, but Pikachu has a tool that Raichu doesn't have, and that is Light Ball attacking. So the Light Ball is an item specific to Pikachu that doubles its attacking stats when it's held. So with this, Volt Tackle can one-shot a Kyogre with minimal attacking investment. Now, there are two Kyogre sets that are often used. One of them is bulkier with a Calm Mind or Leftovers, as well as a Grass Terra, which can give Pikachu problems. On the other hand, the set of full special attack, full speed with Tailwind is the more common use. Now, if you can prevent the Tailwind going up, your Pikachu can one-shot an opposing Kyogre. Even if the Kyogre is for some reason fully built into defense, a max attack, Jolly Nature Pikachu can one-shot it. Now, of course, you do lose the bulk that Raichu has, along with the fact that Pikachu naturally speed ties Kyogre, which could be pretty rough. However, if you are running a Kyogre team that is struggling against other Kyogre teams, Pikachu could be your answer. Now, even though Pikachu has been used in the past, with performances even as recently as early 2024, in a high-powered format like Regulation I, unevolved Pokemon are often seen in only specific niches and not a staple on specific teams. Which means that Raichu may be used on every single Kyogre team, but Pikachu may never be used except for one occasion. But in that one occasion where Pikachu fits that niche that it needs in order to knock out opposing Kyogre, it could be very, very strong. An example of this is Gastrodon's situation right now. Gastrodon has been used in the past and has been really oppressive. But in a format with less strong water types and less consistency in bringing Kyogre and Urshifu, bringing a Gastrodon on your team just for those two specific instances is not going to be beneficial in 90% of your matchups. This is because having a Pokemon like Gastrodon or Pikachu that help you in one specific matchup and don't help you at all anywhere else, meaning that if the opponent's team has an Urshifu on it, you need to play mind games with the opponent to find if you need to bring your Gastrodon or if he's not going to bring his Urshifu. So having a Pikachu limits you to only that Kyogre matchup, whereas having a Raichu helps with other matchups as well as the Kyogre matchup. The difference is that Pikachu can still do the job that Raichu does, just worse. So, if there is a team composition that needs that Raichu support but doesn't need it that badly, but does require that Kyogre knockout threat, Pikachu could be the answer. And it's not like Pikachu is the worst Pokemon in the world. It has top cut a regional, it has come to some pretty high power tournaments, but it is still a niche pick overall. This is also because with Pikachu you have to choose between offense and defense, meaning that if you go with Eviolite to be more bulky and fill that Raichu role, you will lose the offense and the one-hit KO power on Kyogre. Overall, I can see this Pokemon being used more than something like a Scraggy or even like a Gothorita that has seen some usage in the past. But if you're an avid tournament watcher or if you're high in the ranked ladder, I wouldn't expect to see Pikachu often, if at all. So to end the video, we're going to talk about a few Pokemon that I feel like they, despite getting access to the Eviolite, will never be better than their fully evolved form. First Pokemon up is Riolu, who is the only Pokemon with access to Prankster and Coaching. But being as frail as Riolu is, it would only be used with Focus Sash and not Eviolite, and it's not very good. I could see it catching multiple people off guard on ladder, having a Prankster Coaching go through a Protect for a physical attacker, and getting 2 off before your physical attacker moves. This combined with Feint to both break Wide Guard and Sashes. Maybe, just maybe, I'm talking myself into using Riolu. If I do end up using it, there will be a video on that. Coming in the same category are Bisharp and Primeape. Both of these Pokemon have evolutions added in Generation 9 that are just strictly better in every single way. Bisharp is in that speed range where it is too slow and too fast at the same time, meaning it can't be used in fast teams, but it also can't be used under Trick Room. Bisharp with Eviolite has similar bulk to Kingambit on its own, and its only threat is Sucker Punch, which Kingambit still has access to. So that makes Eviolite, Bisharp, and Kingambit very comparable, with Kingambit having 20 points less in speed and 10 points more in attack. The attack stat doesn't overly matter, especially with the ability to Defiant, but overall, they're the same Pokemon, and Kingambit has a free item slot, whereas Bisharp would need the Eviolite. Annihilate and Primeape are in a very similar position, where the evolution gets significantly bulkier, so the Eviolite cancels out. The increased attack stat, the available item slot, and the useful secondary typing make Annihilate just better than Primeape. Torracat saw usage in one tournament just because it is faster than Incineroar, and there was U-turn weakness policy strategies going on with the Dynamaxes. And last but not least is Dunsparce. This one is not necessarily because its evolution is so much better, this is just because it suffers from stand there and do nothing syndrome. For a Pokemon with very poor attacking stats, Dunsparce gets access to a lot of attacking moves, and for the support moves it gets Helping Hand, Yawn, and Glare, which other Pokemon do better. I would rather have a different Pokemon that can apply Sleep Pressure as well, or apply Paralysis Pressure as well, rather than having them centered around it. So, unless there is ever a meta that requires a Choice Band Giga Impact Dunsparce, I don't expect to see him anytime soon. So, as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like. Let me know in the comments if there's any Pokemon that I missed or that you wish you would have seen. And subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Have a great day.